Good morning. Thanks for taking time to be here with us this morning. My name is Jeff Parks. I'm one of the project managers working on the high school and beyond planning project for OSPI. Our team here is leading implementation of the HSBP platform with SchooLinks, who's our vendor who has built the platform. Jared and Shelton from SchooLinks are here behind the scenes. They will be helping folks in the Q&A. So if you have questions, of course, Zoom does have the chat feature, but we would love it if folks would use the Q&A feature in Zoom instead, put their questions in there. You should see that at the bottom of your screen, a little bit to the right of the center of the icons there. If you put anything in chat, we'll try to catch it there as well. And you might be gently urged to go over to the Q&A. Usually we have some other folks also on calls, these webinars from OSPI, but we've got some folks who are in another meeting this morning, and so they weren't able to be here. Everything that is asked in Q&A or chat will be captured. So if your question doesn't get answered today, we will make sure that it makes it into the FAQ that we'll be publishing in the coming months. Also the data sessions, the data webinar sessions that we are doing here last week and the two that we have today are all being recorded. We'll post the best one in the near future for everyone's consumption and sharing, and we'll be providing a link to attendees once that is available. If you're wondering about clock hours, there are clock hours available for this webinar today, and you'll get an email about that after the meeting with a link. And I think that's all the housekeeping I had and announcements. So Mike DeSenza, who is the Chief Technical Officer with SchooLinks, is here with us to lead the session. So I'll hand things over to him and he will guide you through this. So Mike, take it away.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. And thanks everyone for being here. We're really excited to talk about what we need to get going with the new high school and beyond plan platform. So just to review here, what we're going to focus on today is giving a little bit of introduction into the high school and beyond plan platform, the project, and then our platform in general. And then what we're going to do is we're going to talk about how we're actually doing data integration from a sequential perspective, from an architecture perspective, and we're going to share with you some of what these data set requirements are. And we'll also talk about what you can be doing now, even before you start to actually set up the data integration into the platform. And then we should have some time at the end for a Q&A. So if you don't get your questions answered in the Q&A section of Zoom, we'll be able to talk about them then. And we may even go through some of these as a group just to make sure we're all on the same page here. So feel free to chime in. We want to make sure you get all your questions answered. And then we also want to make sure, one, we're not saying like, hey, you got to go do all this stuff right now. This is really, we want to give you the knowledge and the understanding to feel good about this process when the platform rolls out with your districts. So to give you some context here, many of you probably know there's state legislation around having a comprehensive high school and beyond plan platform. And there was an RFP process last year, which led to SchooLinks selection. So SchooLinks, if you're not familiar with us, we've been implementing in Washington State probably the last 5 years with different districts in a number of different parts of the state. We work across 41 other states in consortia, small districts, large districts. We serve Chicago Public Schools and Houston ISD, all types of different projects with focuses on college to career to work-based learning. So we bring a lot of experience, and also since we're very familiar with the high school and beyond plan, this has been a relatively smooth transition for us to go statewide here. The other thing that's important to note as some context is we're doing a lot of work right now with Jeff, with Kim, with others on the OSPI team to be able to make sure that what we're doing is getting anything that we can take care of centrally in terms of setting up and preparing the platform for each of your districts, ingesting data sets at a state level. We want to do all of that before you even get access to the platform, so you have less you need to do to get off the ground. And then right now, this is just the tip of the iceberg. We're not expecting you to know how to do everything step by step. What we're doing is we want to give you a heads up because there's going to be regional and SIS specific data integration sessions and office hours where we're going to spend time supporting each of you and your various rostering and SISs to actually make sure you get the data into your SchooLinks instances. So I want to talk about how this process is going to work and where we are in the process timeline wise, just from a high level. So right now, as mentioned, we have this bunch of ongoing projects, couple meetings a week, doing a bunch of stuff to get the data sets into SchooLinks. And then what's happening in early January is there's a readiness assessment that is going out to each of your districts. So this is, if you're a district that's not already using SchooLinks, super, super important here, because filling in this assessment will basically allow OSPI to determine who gets into cohort year one cohort and year two cohort for the rollout. So in general, we'll be starting the cohort one rollout in the spring, in the early spring, and then cohort two after that in the following year. In general, on SchooLinks side, we're going to defer to OSPI to handle all of the project communication around timeline. So they'll be able to give more specific guidance there. So why are you all here and what is your role here? Well, I think the important thing is to note that we have in a software platform the need to have context around what students have done and what their coursework is, what their historical data is to help them plan for the future. And that's why we work with districts and their SIS teams or data teams to make sure that we have the most up-to-date data. So you will have a very important role in getting the platform off the ground, but also it's not the only role, and hopefully it's not too much burden. We have their counseling and academic leads who are going through a separate set of webinars, separate trainings, and what they're really responsible for is making sure that their district folks are trained, the platform is configured, and they're going through the change management to change their internal processes from a Naviance or Zello or what other system they might have been using before. So you two will really be, could be two, could be more folks in this group, but you all will be the leads in the district, but you'll have a bit of division of labor here. And so the reason I call this out is I know this may be a new platform for you all, but I also want to let you know is we're not expecting you to be experts in the SchooLinks platform. There's kind of a bare minimum of just, we want you to understand conceptually what we're doing, where the data sets that you will be supporting with the transfer of are going in the platform, and then how to know how this data is loaded, where the logging is, how you can track if it's up to date. But we're not expecting you to necessarily learn how to use it like these counselors and day-to-day users. So we hope this gets a little bit of pressure off of you in that regard. So I want to talk about SchooLinks in general and how we think about our platform, just so that you get a sense of what the scope of the implementation is. So when we go into districts, a lot of the time we're focused on how are we taking tools and processes and things that lived across different departments and bringing them onto the same platform. And that's really helpful because a student's college and career and post-secondary journey, it's not something that just happens in the counseling department. There's lots of other folks that contribute to the decision-making process and the day-to-day operational support of students going through their process from middle school or even elementary school all the way to high school, and in their experience, even as alumni of school districts. So the main departments and the folks that get involved in our implementations are counseling. Counseling is kind of who you would think of to begin with. They're traditionally the people that had owned Naviance or Zello in their departments. And they're the people that are working with students around career and college exploration, academic planning, fulfilling college application materials, things like that. Then the other folks that get really involved are generally career and technical education and work-based learning. So we have a full set of tools for these kinds of workflows. In the initial rollout, those are not going to be, the whole set is not included in the platform. A subset of those tools are. So that's going to lessen a little bit of the onboarding process and burden for new districts, but it still gives districts who need a full set of features the ability to access those as well. The accountability aspect of what we do is also very important. As you know, the High School and Beyond Plan is a legislatively required state level like endeavor that we're doing with our students in our school districts, and a certain amount of this process needs to be documented, needs to be tracked, and a lot of what we do is make it easier to see in a clear dashboard for districts as well as the state who's finished their plans, what are the choices that they've made, and to be able to surface that information at scale, not only to be able to say, hey, we're doing stuff the right way, but also because these plans inform how your counselors and your teachers interact with students and how you plan some of the pathways or some of the CTE courses that you might want to offer based on your students' interests. And lastly, we won't spend too much time on this because this is a little bit outside the scope of the initial high school and beyond plan rollout, but we do have a really robust set of features around keeping track of your alumni. And in SchooLinks, alumni students, when they transition to alumni, they can put down their personal information and claim their account as alumni. So even if they get off of your rostering method, they'll be able to keep their resumes, portfolios, all the work that they've done in SchooLinks. So let's talk about the high school and beyond plan platform, or the high school and beyond plan aspect of the platform itself. I think this is really one of the main reasons that SchooLinks was a successful bidder here in this RFP process, is we're really, to my knowledge, the only platform in the market that instead of having students fill out a plan and copy and paste stuff from other activities, our plan is actually a synthesis and a culmination of all of the activities that students do on the platform, and it formalizes it into a single document where counselors, students, parents can review. So all of these different activities that make up the high school and beyond plan, we assign through a tool that we call Scope and Sequence. The Scope and Sequence builder is something that your counseling and academic counterparts are using to set up the expectations and the due dates of the actual use of the platform in the individual modules. So it populates to-dos and reminders to students' dashboard. When the students do all these things, we store the data from each of those modules. And then in the plan itself, what we're doing is then pulling those data points from those other tables and other parts of the modules into a centralized version so that you can have a really nice overview of all of the activities and the information that informs students' post-secondary planning. And then that's an individual plan, but then there's the question of how do you manage this at scale? So all of our platform is set up to have individual student experiences and then analytics and list views on top of those individual students' experiences. And what we're doing is we're tracking the completion and providing the tooling to do things like bulk message students, send reminders, see who's done what, share certain plans with guardians, and actually manage the life cycle of these plans across multiple users at once, rather than having to do everything on an individual basis. And so it's this, what we call internally counselor ergonomics, that makes it really nice and really efficient for staff members to manage the completion of tasks, not just the high school and beyond plan, but anything else in SchooLinks at scale very easily. So this is the tip of the iceberg here in terms of the modules. One of the things that just I wanted to call out really quickly in this screenshot, we're going to talk about the 4-year planner, the course planner. That's a really big aspect of the data integration that we're doing. And this is really important because we need to have students plan what their graduation requirements are, as well as be able to keep track of what they've already done. And so that's really what's motivating a lot of the data integration process here. So let's talk about how this data integration process is going to work. First off, I mentioned this before, but to be more specific about it, we are working with OSPI to take the historical grade history H, as well as the course catalog file D, SBA assessments, SAT, ACT, any data that we can get centrally from OSPI, and we're going to preload it into your individual district instances. And the really nice thing about this is if you're a SchooLinks district, you know that there can be quite a few things that you can put into SchooLinks. Not that this stuff is difficult, but it just adds to the layer of work that you all have integrating other systems. So where possible, our goal is to get anything that we could do without your input done ahead of time. And then each district, you'll get your own SchooLinks instance. You'll have that data that we've put in, but then we also make sure that you can add other data. You can override what you historically reported as your course catalog file in the previous year with your current year data, and you can do that in bulk. And so we're giving you the flexibility to be able to update this data programmatically, or in our UI. If you're doing it in the UI, that becomes less of a data integration process, but more of something that your counselors and teaching and learning staff are going to be doing. What's also really important is we're really providing support for pretty much every SIS in Washington. And we've had experience implementing with all of the major SISs in the state. So we have really specific information about how you would set up these exports as SkyBuild templates. We have pre-built templates and XML files for you to just plug into the system. We have data export manager templates for PowerSchool. We've done this with Synergy. We've done this with Infinite Campus and have queries and structures to be able to export this stuff without doing a lot of modification, which means the lift for you all should be minimal. Now, the other thing is we're engaging with WSIPSI and the ESDs in order to be able to actually do more of this centrally and take even more of these actions off your plate. So everything that I'm talking about is kind of going to be what I would say is the minimum requirement for help that we need from you all. But as we start to get through more of our work and partnering with these organizations, some of this stuff actually may end up off of your plate. We talked about this before, but we have training and that's going to be delivered on a SIS specific and topic specific basis. And then we have Washington specific documentation for your workflow that's separate. Well, it includes some of the overall platform workflows, but it's really tailored to how we're doing this implementation. And I've got a link later in the presentation. I'll also send it in the chat so you can have that for reference. So I want to cover this because I know we've got a bunch of technical folks here. I think sometimes it helps you get a good visual picture of what's happening and how the data is flowing. So we'll start on the left-hand side, which is the systems you all own. So the SIS is really going to be the main source of data for populating and provisioning the accounts and any of the data about students that we need in the platform. So a lot of the account data, the students, staff members, even guardians, a lot of this can come through rostering intermediaries. So for many of you that have Clever and ClassLink, those are generally our most popular ways to populate the system. And then the other would be OneRoster, which pretty much every Skyward Queue and Skyward SMS instance is going to have under the hood. So what we're going to do is we're going to help you all get these set up, and that's going to be a really easy way to open up the platform and 95% of the functionality to your students, counselors, and users. Then what we're doing is we're working with you to set up each of the additional exports that's going to come through a SkyBuild data export manager, possibly a SQL query, depending on your tool. And that's going to go this way into an SFTP server that we host and be automatically processed so it can get into students' plans. As part of legislation, we also support IEPs going from your special ed systems into our high school and beyond plans. We'll talk a little bit more about how that works later in this deck. And then lastly, we need to onboard, if you have good high school and beyond plan data from your previous system, we need to get that into the system to make sure students aren't starting from scratch. And each of these exports can go through a data upload portal, which is actually a really nice aspect of our platform. So we actually show all of your data, what we call data processors, which is where any files that you upload run. And we allow you to upload these directly in the UI to test and then to track what's happened from automated uploads in the system as well, really easily. So that's something that people really like about the platform. The other thing you'll see here is we're getting the CEDARS and assessment data in separately, which is something that you don't have to worry about. You're managing the left side. And then all of this green box is the different pieces of infrastructure that allow us to take that data and get it into the application to work well. So that's the spatial or the different systems layout of how this is happening. I want to also talk about when this is happening, so you get some context on how your role in this fits into a broader timeline. So right now, this is what we're doing. We're doing the data loading on our side. We have a team that's focused on this with the OSPI team. We're also configuring all of the basic settings so that we have what we call a template district that we're going to clone out and issue to each of you. I talk about this in our documentation. I'll mention it briefly. The contacts who you'll fill in on this readiness survey are going to be the people whose accounts that we're going to pre-create in the SchooLinks instances. So that should be one of you, at least one of you from each of the districts, so that you can set up the rostering within the platform and add other staff members to get everything set up in each SchooLinks instance. So you'll claim your SchooLinks account, set up the rostering, and then that is really what's going to enable the end user usage. And then we've got these other data sets that we'll talk about, which are, I saw someone mention this in chat, transcripts, GPA, things like that, that we say, are very useful. I would say ultimately optional, depending on how you want to use the data or use the platform. But we see 95% of districts embracing the use of our college application manager, sending transcripts in. And it's a really easy process. So that's this phase here. And then going down to your next orange phase, so the orange is all of what y'all are doing, you're going to support on the academic planning setup. And then lastly, this is optional here. After students make their course plans, so for their 4-year course plans, the immediate next year of their course plan is actually what you need to do master scheduling. It's your series of course requests. And so with all of the major SISs, all the SISs that are represented here, there's a process for importing those course requests into a course request table and using them along with alternate course requests that we also support, using those to power your master scheduling process so that your planning and your course selection end up happening as part of the same process on SchooLinks. And so if you're implementing in this school year in our first rollout, basically what's happening is you'll get access in the spring. You'll be able to set up the rostering, and then at any point in time, you can start getting the files set up for Course Planner, get the requirements configured, and then what'll happen is next year is the first year you will do the course planning. So we really recommend, if you have the bandwidth, doing it over the summer or doing it in the spring. That really helps make sure that you feel like you're in a good spot to train your counselors and your staff members ahead of time with real data. And that gives you a lot of time to prepare for. Normally it's I would say between November and March course planning season, which will be the first course planning next year. So fall of 2025 to spring of 2026, if you're in that cohort 1. If you're in a later cohort, that would be lagged another year. So how are you going to get us this data? So I'd mentioned this before, but since we've worked with all these different SISs, we have really robust documentation on how to pull each of these files. So this is our overall data and technical integration guide, and I've linked this later in the presentation. But you'll see here we have a bunch of different SIS specific sets of documents. So this is where you'll go in and you'll see, hey, here are the different schemas that we use. Here are the different interfaces that you can import into SkyBuild to generate exactly the data that we need. We have a couple different alternate methods if people want. We know some people use Crystal reports on Skyward, but the majority of people, they're using these SkyBuild templates. We have the same thing for PowerSchool. We have another document elsewhere for Infinite Campus. We have something for Synergy. So all of this lives here in this documentation. Now, I've mentioned this before, but there's a possibility that you may actually have to do less of this because we'll be able to get most of these files set up centrally with SMS 2.0. That's what we're working with SIPSI on. And then with Skyward Q, we actually are in the process of creating an integration with Skyward that would actually set up and send all of these almost without any work. Right now, we do have templates that are already set up as pre-built reports that you can select from Skyward, and we're going to try and make it even easier for y'all. And then lastly, that data upload UI that I mentioned is really nice because initially you may not know if you have exactly the files right. You want to see that this process is properly. You want to see if there might be any changes that you need to make if you're doing a custom export or something like that. Uploading it in our system allows you to get immediate feedback on the file format. And then you can make those changes and be able to go and upload it again whenever you want in the UI. Once you have the file processing properly, then you can automate it into our SFTP instance. So I'm not going to talk too much about these, but all of these are clickable links that take you to the exact instructions for each rostering method, as well as each file format. So I'm putting it out there. There's really four main things that you have to do to get set up on the platform. First is rostering. And at the very least, you need to have students and staff members in. Guardians can be rostered, or we have a claim process for that. We also need a course master. We're going to learn as much as we can from your historical course catalog file from CEDARS. But if you're offering new courses the following year, you've changed courses, sunset courses, we'd like to get that from the SIS directly instead of having your staff update it manually. And then the other thing is we're going to need to know what your students' semester 1 and semester 2 courses of the current year are, because that's not in the CEDARS file. And then lastly, as part of the legislation, students with IEPs also need those IEPs in the high school and beyond plan. We've seen the exports from IEP online, and what we're going to be planning to do is parsing out each of the sections of the PDF or each of the students' PDFs into individual files and then putting them into students' high school and beyond plans automatically. And we also have the option, if you can't export it in the format that we need, you can upload these individually to plans as needed. This is the set of other recommended data sets that we've mentioned. So this is where we're looking at the GPA, class rank, counselor caseloads. Student tags are identifying students that are it might be free and reduced lunch eligible, ethnicities, anyone that you want to, in terms of breaking out student performance for equity purposes to monitor that. It's a really good use case for student tags. For academic planner, if you're a district with multiple high schools, we do need to know where your 8th graders are going to attend high school to allow them to plan properly. And then we have really robust documentation about what historical data that we can take from Naviance, Zello, and other CCR platforms in this link. So we're not doing the rostering yet. We're not doing the data integration now. So the question is, what can you all be doing to make sure that you are starting off on the right foot? And once you get access to the platform, things are going to go smoothly. So I've divided this into a couple sections. First, we want to talk about how are we going to prep rostering data? Well, the first thing is you really need to pick your rostering approach. So if you have Clever or ClassLink, to me, that's a no-brainer. That's what you should do because you're going to get SSO for your students and staff members who use it through those rostering methods. If you are a Skyward Q or a Skyward SMS person and you don't have ClassLink or Clever, I would say your best bet is going to be OneRoster. Other SISs like Synergy also support OneRoster. And then really, excuse me, I'd say the fallback is our proprietary CSV. So that's if you're generating a report and you need to send the roster data to SchooLinks. This is the structure of those CSVs. Really, the only districts that I think are going to be doing that are power school districts that do not have Clever or ClassLink. Now, the other thing that's important with all this is you need to make sure that that you can share your student's state ID, so your SSID. And that's really important because all that historical course history data from your district, or even for students that were outside of your district, the test scores, all that stuff we're getting centrally from OSPI is keyed off of the SSID. So if we're going to do your rostering from one of the Skyward SISs, we will make sure that in the setup of those OneRoster syncs that the state ID is coming through. For Clever and ClassLink districts, you need to make sure that your setting has that ID coming through, because if it doesn't, we're going to reject your data and say, hey, you got to go back and put it in. So that's going to be a really important check that's going to be really specific to the Washington implementation. Now, the other thing that's important is staff data. If you look at each of your rostering methods, you're going to want to audit who is coming through. I'd actually, this is something I don't necessarily have the best idea of what's happening on the SIS side or the ClassLink Clever side, but you have settings that control who gets access to each each platform based on the role of that staff member. So in SchooLinks, we're going to want teachers. We're going to want counselors, admins, principals, folks like that. I'd say sometimes there's a challenge of making sure that counselors and admins get shared with the sync because they don't necessarily have course sections. So there's ways to add them to Clever and ClassLink if they don't automatically come over from the SIS. And on the flip side, We generally don't want people like bus drivers or janitors unless they're functioning as advisors or someone that should have access to student data. So this is something that our team checks and flags when we're doing the implementation with y'all. And then lastly, you need to have some plan for Guardian data. So the thing I'd say is the most important deciding factor on whether you want to sync Guardian data in is, do you feel like you have up-to-date emails? Because if you sync Guardian data in, your Guardians are going to have to get access to a claim code that gets sent to their email. If their email is not up to date, they can't get the claim code and they can't access SchooLinks. So in that case, you would use our claim process, which is basically issuing unique links to guardians of students that the students can pull from their end of the tool, or you could send in bulk or print out and provide to guardians. So the course planner data prep is the other big thing that you need to focus on. A lot of this stuff actually really isn't SchooLinks specific at all. The headline here is just do a good job on CEDARS reporting this cycle, because that data will basically get pulled into SchooLinks. So what I mean by that is we need to concentrate on making sure that your courses, your courses that have state course codes, are properly mapped to those state course codes. The reason that's important is we've pre-created a graduation plan, which is basically a mapping of courses to subject requirements. And we've done that in this template OSPI district. And when we create your individual district, what we're going to do is we're going to take your local courses and, based on their state course code, associate them with the general buckets of subjects that they count for. So if you don't have these properly matched, we're not going to match those local courses to the subject requirements. And that's going to be work that your counseling team or your teaching and learning team is going to have to go in and do manually in order for a requirement checking logic to work for students. The other thing that's important is our course designation codes get up to date in your SIS. So this should be familiar for you. This is really just straight out of the CEDARS reporting manual. All of these are super helpful, because what we're also doing with students is trying to help them understand that they're picking a set of courses that meet the level of rigor of their post-secondary plan. So we need to know what courses that you offer our advanced placement, our honors, our IB, if you offer that, because those will actually help designate those courses as part of recommended courses for students. And not to mention, this is really important on your transcripts anyhow. So this probably shouldn't be anything new that's coming up. The other thing that's important is marking courses as active or inactive by building. So a lot of what actually helps this process save you all and your counselors schedule changes in future years is by making sure that students are actually selecting courses that plan to be offered in the buildings that they're going to be enrolled in the following year. And the last one, pretty easy, but if you want course descriptions showing up in SchooLinks, and we also have a public course catalog that I think we had a question about that last time. So we can publish your course offerings so that your parents and students, future students, people can access without a login. If you want those available to all the folks in the community, you need to add your courses to your SIS. Otherwise, we're just going to default to what the state course code has as a description in the OSPI course catalog. So just to zoom in a little bit about some of the best practices for Course Planner, there's a lot of things that happen in Course Planner. For you all, you're not super responsible for all of them. I mean, there's certain pieces that you're going to touch. You're going to support data in, but there's configuration, there's user testing, there's the actual planning that students do, the export of the courses, and then you're back in the spotlight again, where if you choose to import the selected courses for next year, you're going to handle that on the SIS side. And so when we do this implementation, this is, the tip of the iceberg here, but we spend a lot of time helping to establish best practices, give you document templates for communication and project management to help you coordinate with your counseling and teaching and learning staff, so this happens in a structured way. Ultimately, I know, and I think this is a good thing, many of you really care deeply about having your SIS be the source of truth. And that is our recommended approach. Your SIS is your system of record. So if that's the case, what we really need to do is, before we actually have people go through the configuration user testing process, make sure that your course master and the stuff that you're going to send to SchooLinks is up to date. And so that's the best approach. Now, sometimes we find that there are it's difficult to update requirements. It's difficult to update courses. People like our ability to bulk update courses. It's faster and easier in our UI to do it. This is okay. You just need to be on the same page with your counseling and teaching staff here about what that process of updating your courses in your SIS is, because your SIS is what does the master scheduling and does the CEDARS reporting. And so we've made that process pretty easy if this is the route you choose to go down, where we can allow updating of courses within SchooLinks or restricting of those updates, and then an export of what we call a diff file. So if you needed to change a course subject or change a set of tags on a course or any of these things in SchooLinks, you have the ability to make that change. And then we track that a particular field is edited. We track the edit history of all of those fields. And then we support an update, an export that basically creates a diff between what's in your SIS and what's in SchooLinks and allows you to update that after the fact. But that's really a decision for you all to make in terms of how you want to handle this process here. The last thing I'll mention about data sets is PDFs. I think we did have a question about this here. So we need a PDF export of transcripts if you want us to send these through Parchment or through Common App to the institutions that your 12th graders or your seniors are applying to college at. So this is a bulk transcript that we parse out based on student ID being on each page. So we've got many districts that use I think most of our districts use the standard Washington state transcript. So that's really easy for us to parse. We support all the major SIS's transcripts. The big thing there is the ID on that transcript that we're using to parse needs to also be a part of the SchooLinks roster. So if you're using SSID, like the state transcript, that's going to happen, no problem. One other thing here that's useful to mention is you need to have that SIS ID on every single page of the bulk transcript. So we split the giant PDF into the right chunks to go with individual students. Your high school and beyond plan historical data, the reality is most of the historical data we've seen, like from my school data and stuff like that, it ends up not being in structured enough data for us to associate with the normalized table structure we have. So we're looking at getting most of that as a PDF. So these PDFs need to be sent and need to also have student IDs there. I did link in our Washington specific guide to a schema that does allow you to send whatever data you have in structured CSV format. And then lastly, we already talked about this IEP export. So here are the links and the information that we wanted to share with you to be able to keep around. So I'm going to pull, let me actually make sure I have the right link for you all, but I'm going to pull some of these and put them in the chat here so you have them. And then we'll be sending out the links as well with the deck after the fact. I can put it in the chat. Here we go. So there's this one. This is the general link. And then give me 1 second. I'll put in the OSPI one as well, the Washington specific one. There we go. All right, so once we start doing this, we'll just call it again. There's going to be a lot of trainings. We don't expect you to know exactly what to do after this. So if you read the documentation, I hope you get pretty far in that direction. What we've done is tried to be as transparent as we can. This document that we have for the Washington specific stuff, we're continuing to update, especially as we make more headway in terms of our partnership with SIPC and others. So we have a full data integration team that supports our districts. They're kind of the escalation point from our individual customer success managers, but we are very active. I think I saw some names here of people I know who have interacted with our team. So you should all have a good sense of the kind of the level of rigor and structure that we have and precision that we've got here. Because ultimately, we know in order to get the platform off the ground and make it easy for y'all, we have to be transparent and structured with our engagement. One thing I didn't mention here, but on this slide, we have as well a project management system that we use in the background for all of our districts. That's something that we can share access to you all just for transparency around tracking where you're at. And that gives a very structured set of steps and a suggested timeline. And it's something that our customer success managers do share with districts after they kick off. So it's something you're welcome to use internally to track your progress. But we also do have districts who use their own tracking tools to say, hey, we want to get this rostered by this date, get this data set in by the X date, things like that. All right. So I think at this point, we'll turn it over to Q&A here. And then also just throw this up here for those of you that have additional questions that we don't get answered. This is OSPI's High School and Beyond Plan email. So we work very closely with the team there. They'll pass on any questions to us. We had a few come in from this email from the last webinar. So, all right, switching over to Q&A. Catch my breath for a second. Let's see. What do we got? Jeff, do you have any of these up? Do you want to ask some that weren't answered, or should I just go from the top? I guess I'll go from the top.
Yeah, I was gonna say, why don't you just take it from the top there? There might be
Okay.
Some in there that are more
Got it.
procedural questions from the OSPI side that we need addition put on. That's why I haven't answered them yet.
Okay. Thank you for all of your questions here. I'm gonna not say your names because I'm probably gonna mess them up and it'll be very embarrassing for me. But we had a question about where will the system get course guide information to upload into the High School and Beyond plan? So it's really essentially a hierarchy of the first source of that data is your previous course catalog file D from your previous CEDARS reporting cycle. And then what'll happen is you can upload any course master data from your current course master from the SIS before you do the planning. And then after that, there's also the ability for individual uploads or updates of courses in the platform, though we do realize many of you might not want that. So that's something that you can disable as well. All right. If your district is transitioning to cumulative in April this year, would you recommend our district be a pilot for SchooLinks or wait until the secondary rollout? That's a good one. We've actually had a couple conversations about this. Ultimately, I think it's up to you and what your bandwidth is. I would say you're most likely going to want to wait because you're going to want to make sure that you can focus on getting your data right in cumulative, because I think you'd have a lot more work to do if your transition doesn't happen smoothly. Realistically, you could get students access from whatever roster server you have. If you have Clever or ClassLink and you're not rostering directly from SMS 2.0, that makes it a little bit easier to do both at the same time. And then you would be able to push some of the academic planning implementation further down the road until your cumulative is live. But ultimately, it's really up to you and what you think your bandwidth is. Very long question that I might follow up after with you, Gretchen. I think it's more about division of labor and who has access to what systems and who's going to be doing what. One thing I do want to be clear about is we certainly understand that there is a variety of different titles and roles and different people who have access and are using the platform, and they might be using it for different things. One thing that is important to mention is we do have role-based permission, as well as this idea of student scope. So, I mean, if you're concerned about who is accessing what students' data, who approves plans, who sees this stuff, all of this is determined based on these two factors of, for a staff member in the platform, which students can they access, and then for those students, what modules and what pieces of data are they able to access. And that's something that you are able to set in the platform very easily in our staff account management. Okay, 4-year course plan for high school and beyond plan. Would it be possible to for SchooLinks to migrate each student's courses from Synergy to SchooLinks to keep it more accurate in real time? Yes, that is the goal. So I think there's two pieces here. The current courses, that needs to come from the SIS 100%. If you already have a course plan and 4 years worth of courses in Synergy, we also have what we call a pre-selected course file, which is a schema that allows you to send in updated versions or updated courses for future years that aren't taken. So that's a possibility as well. We have a question about supporting PowerSchool's version of IEP Online. So I think that's the special programs module. Is that right, Abigail? So that is something that across the board, we need to support the uploads of IEPs. Now, the method of support on this is going to kind of be determined on whether you can export in bulk all of the plans in one file, and if they have a student state ID or a student local ID that's going to be in our system on every page of the plan. If you can do that, then we're able to parse these out automatically. If you're not able to do that, then we're in a situation where we actually have to have someone go in from the district and add each plan as an element of a student's high school and beyond plan. What is the plan to support our non-high districts? You talked about making sure students know which high school they will attend in the same district if a student is attending high school in another district. I actually didn't realize Washington had these. This is something that we deal with a lot in California and Illinois because they have K-8 districts and 9-12 districts. So that's something I think we're going to have to think a little bit about. In the past, what we've done is we've basically moved students or given those students accounts in the new district that they're planning for, because that is the district that has the course catalog set up. And that's also the district where the counselors are able to provide meaningful input on about the course offerings. And so that's something I think I'd like to follow up more about. I see you're an anonymous attendee, but if you want to send in a message to that high school HSBP at k12.wa.us and talk about how you think this might work well, that's something that we can plan with your district on. The next question was about Synergy version of IEPs. Yes, same approach to how we're planning on doing it for PowerSchool. It's really a matter of how you can export these. So for both the PowerSchool and the Synergy folks that are using their IEP tools, I would love to get in touch with you all. And so we can follow up after this just to make sure that we could get possibly a sample file with redacted information or just some information about how you're actually doing that export. When you say course master updated, how far into the future? Which course master for 11th and 12th grade classes does a 9th grader choose currently this year? Or do we need to have 4 years and more available at all times? So here's the thing is we completely understand that your course offerings are going to change each year. When you're an 8th grader, the state legislation requires you to plan for 4 years of courses. If those courses are no longer offered, then we actually have an automated way to kick out that course and then have a student in their subsequent year of planning be able to go in and replan that subject. So if you had, for instance, offered a certain math course in their junior year, and the student, an 8th grader chose that for their junior year, comes to, freshman year, they're planning again and it's not offered, we would basically kick out that junior year course and that senior year course and have them reevaluate their plan. So we handle this and we don't expect those courses to remain consistent over time. Data sharing agreement. Yep. So this is one that we're working with through through OSPI. We have a data sharing agreement at a state level with those folks. And then we're trying to figure out what exactly would be needed on the local level. We do have DPAs, DSAs signed with all of our existing Washington districts. And depending on what needs to happen from a policy perspective, we will either be trying to handle that centrally or going through individually with each district to do that prior to the transfer of data. And that's one thing that I think will be important in this readiness assessment. The survey that we're going to send out is knowing who in your district actually handles the data sharing agreements. Yes, Abigail's question about master scheduling for registrars. Yeah, 100%. There will be lots of training around this, and you all on the technical side are welcome to join as well. But that's kind of the configuration business stakeholder track of what we do for Course Planner. It's mentioned that this info will go to the superintendent. Is there another way to access info for smaller districts who have one person doing multiple roles? One is counselor training, IEP training. We don't have a designated data person. So I think, I don't know if Jeff, you want to chime in on this, but we have multiple contacts that OSPI has for each district, which includes the superintendent, whoever is designated as the CEDARS person, and a counseling lead, as well as a tech lead. Whoever those people are in the OSPI contact list will get that email. If you don't get that email or you can't find these people, I think it's reasonable to reach out to the high school and beyond plan folks on our end or on the OSPI end, and they'll tell you who they sent the assessment to, and you would be able to follow up directly with them. Are students able to individually enter student information on the platform without bulk integration? Certain things, yes, but certain things, no. So we don't support individual like test score updates because we found that can be challenging. We don't actually support currently individual uploads, individual updates to student information. That comes through the rostering syncs. We do have people who actually use a Google Sheet to manage their CSVs, and then we have a mechanism to pull the roster data out of a CSV. So effectively, you can kind of do that for rostering data. But if there's specific questions on particular data points that you would want to manage individually, let us know. We can answer that more specifically. We have Power School people who are finding each other here. Next question, alternative high school using my school data to track these things. Does the system track this as well? So learning plans and attendance. Yeah, we don't track attendance. We're not a SIS. We're a college and career readiness platform that is really focused on providing the tools to do the planning, career exploration, college application, but we do not replace a SIS for that. So you still need your SIS. Question about adding courses to our course master for an online school. We have only a handful of licenses for students. They must attend full-time as of now. Is this a case of having two separate course guides? Having a hard time wrapping my head around the new online courses and active courses. So this is actually a scenario if the students need to be enrolled full-time in the online school, I would actually go ahead and set that up as a different school within the platform. The other thing that you can do is you can set eligibility criteria for certain courses. So even if you don't set up a separate building in your SIS, you have the ability to tag a student as being an online student and then restrict access to those courses to specific students through a mechanism we call a course sequence. So that's something that we'll cover in more detail when we do the course implementation. But yeah, we have mechanisms for restricting access to courses really nicely. The readiness survey, I think, is going out on or before January 6th. Are districts required to use the course planner function? That's a policy question that maybe we can get some more clarity on. I'm not sure, so we'll have to come back and get an answer for you on that. We have another one transitioning to cumulative in summer 2026. So I think that's going to be a huge group of people as this transition happens for the Skyward platform. So if you're SMS 2.0 and you want to be on the first cohort, I would suggest you can certainly do that. We go through and support SIS transitions all the time. So if someone's in SchooLinks and they're moving to a different SIS, it's fairly normal. What we do is we just, in the rostering data and all the data sets, we just need to check if they're keyed off of the right student IDs. So I don't think that would prevent you from necessarily doing this. And actually, what I would suggest is, again, the opposite of this previous question I answered, you'll have more bandwidth to implement SchooLinks right now before the next cohort, when in the next cohort, you will be actually undergoing the SIS transition. You have an API we can leverage for our data warehouse Power BI reporting. So we don't have a public API, mainly because most of the data people want out of the platform, it's actually bulk data. But we have a couple things that we offer. The first thing that we offer is we have in our report center the ability to, and hopefully you can see this, I'm just hiding a bunch of my Zoom panels here. In our report center, we have the ability to actually schedule any of our reports. And so these can be scheduled to go to our SFTP location that we host for you, or an SFTP location of your choosing. And so, for example, what you can do is you can basically select the details, the filters on these reports, which columns you want, the ordering, things like that. And then you can schedule to delivery to SFTP, and then you build your ETL process off this. We also do have a raw log level dump of a bunch of different tables that we actually developed for Spokane Public Schools a while back. And so that would give you even more granular data than any of these reports, but they're like 80 of these different reports. So whatever data that you want to prioritize for getting in, you have the ability to schedule and ingest. And then we're happy to help you with this if you want to get more information in terms of data dictionary, what each of these reports mean. Will districts already use? Oh, Chris, that's funny. We get Spokane in the building here. So will districts using SchooLinks see any changes from the central data loading? The answer is really no. We're going to suppress central data loading for those districts, and we also do have the ability to suppress it for other people if needed. I think this was really important because we wanted to not override anything that people had already set up. So if you have concerns about this, let us know. But in general, our default approach is leave the districts that already have data in alone, with the exception of the fact that if you don't have state course code data, you'll need to start sending that in your files, as well as if you don't have SSID for students, we need that. Let's see. The next question is Amelia for a user of schooldata.net. And so it's a question about cost. So your cost is covered by your cost for SchooLinks is covered by OSPI. And then, yes, you do need to transfer the data out of your historical solution, whether it's school data, Zello, Naviance, before the end of your contract, so that you have it around to be able to load into SchooLinks. And so that would require that's important even if you're not in the initial cohort and you have a gap of coverage, like for a few months or something. You need to make sure you know when your contract end date is, and to be able to pull that data. Is it possible to take courses from SchooLinks and directly import into Synergy for master scheduling? Yes, that's right. What we do is we use the generic conversion functionality in Synergy to be able to import that. We have a specific file format for actually pretty much all of the SISs, but there's one that's set up for generic conversion. And that's something that we'll also go through in our SIS-specific sessions. Are there data exports available in SchooLinks? Yep, we showed that in the report center. How will SchooLinks understand course equivalencies, ensure transfer between buildings, do not have duplicate course histories. Yeah, so there's a couple of things there. In general, what we do is on the state, for the state course codes, we treat those, if you have the same course code, we treat those as equivalent. So even if you have different versions, like an honors algebra 1, on algebra 1, and they share the same course code, we automatically mark those as equivalent. The other thing is you have the ability to go in and manage the equivalencies in SchooLinks. So you can actually go down here and then mark specific courses as equivalent. And so you basically add these as equivalent courses as a group. So if you had like drawing 1 and you wanted to have like art 1, which I don't know if we have here, like, yeah, this fine arts 1, right? If you wanted to take that and make it equivalent, you could basically mark these together, and then it would not allow students to take more than 1 credit of these courses combined. All right. Can families and districts opt out of having their data sent? That's a great question. If they have to use a high school and beyond platform by law, I am not sure about that one. So that's one we're going to have to follow up on. How many languages will the system communicate with students and families? So a couple of things here. As part of our implementation with OSPI, what we're doing is we're doing professional language translation into the top 8 languages spoken in Washington. So we have basically all these strings that are pre-built in the platform are being sent for translation. And then what's happening is outside of those 8 languages, I think we have 135 languages that are supported through Google Translate. So what you have the ability to do is turn on that translation here directly in the platform. And then we've also gone and done things like added no translate tags in the HTML for student names, proper nouns, stuff like that. So it works pretty nicely. All right, last question. I know we're 1 minute over. If we have students in 2 districts, home districts and secondary, complete trades training, do they have 2 accounts? Well, this is a fun one. If they have 2 different emails and they're in both SISs, then they will basically by default have 2 different accounts. If they share the same email, you're going to run into a problem because they'll only have 1 account. Generally speaking, we would want students to only have 1 account in their system, in the district that is their system of record. So it's really maybe who is the majority, but this seems like a good question that we'll also have to make sure that we clarify the expectation with OSPI. And the last question here was approximately when will trainings be offered and extra trainings. So the trainings are probably going to be offered based on when the cohort is, and that when the cohort starts. So it looks like the cohort decision for the first cohort, the decision is going to be made in February. The training will probably start as soon as March and then go through the spring. We'll probably have some summer training as well as refresh training, we call just-in-time training for the end users and the counselors right before the expectation of doing course planner or doing these things. And then we'll have periodic office hours throughout that period of time. And then I think we do have the ability, if you want personalized in-person training outside of the group trainings, you'll also have the ability to make arrangements, i.e. kind of purchase that training above and beyond directly from the SchooLinks team.
All right.
All right.
I wanted to let Mike get through those because he was so close to being done.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for sticking with us for another couple minutes, assuming that you did and you're still on the call. To reiterate one thing I said earlier, in case you're wondering about clock hours, there's an hour available for this webinar, and you'll get an email about that with a link after we're done here. And you'll also, once we get through all 3 of our webinars and we select the best video of the 3, we'll send out a link of that as well. And the slides were requested, so we'll make sure that folks can get a copy of those slides too. For any questions that we didn't get to today, we do have them all recorded, so we will be producing an FAQ in the future. and we will try to make sure that we get everything answered there if we didn't get it answered here today. So thanks all. Go have a great rest of your day. And we'll look forward to hearing from you if you have any other questions. And you can send questions to hsbp@k12.wa.us. And that will come to the OSPI HSBP project team. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a good one. Bye-bye. Thanks for taking